Well, today's Harry's Garage is on one of my favourite cars in the garage. Obviously not the smartest car in the garage or the highest value, but one that's a bit of a hoot. It's the Jaguar XJ V12. What makes this one so intriguing is the previous owner, who owned it since 1987, and I bought it last year in 2014, so a huge period of ownership. Obviously absolutely adored this car and made some very tasty modifications along the way. But first of all, the coupe version is actually of the Series 2 XJ. The XJ was massively successful for Jaguar when it first came out in 1968. Series 1 sold something like 98,000 cars. Series 2, 78,000 cars. But William Lyons fancied doing a coupe version. And in October 1973, showed this car at the London Motor Show. Very elegant. The trouble was, he wanted to make it pillarless, so the doors have been extended, so they added 4 inches of those. There's quite a lot of engineering to do that, and you move the B pillar, and he wanted to make it pillarless because it has that beautiful, elegant look if you do a pillarless coupe. That gave the Jaguar engineers a massive amount of problems, because this is a 150 mile an hour coupe. He wanted the refinement to be the same as the saloons, and there was all sorts of solutions to try and get the windows to seal. So it took 2 years before it actually went into production. But I think it was worth it, and now it's obviously a very rare car, because those numbers, they made 10,000 coupes in total, but only 1,800 of those were Jaguar V12 versions. So to put that in perspective, the holy grail of Jaguar E-Type is the Series 1, the 3.8 Series 1. Well, there's 15,000 of those. So if you want a V12 XJC, there's a 10-to-1 ratio almost. So these cars are 10 times rarer than the holy grail of the E-Type Series 1 3.8. Some of the lovely details on this car are the Kent alloys. They were optional in period. You used to get the steel, sort of chrome steel on the XJs. I think they really set off the car really nicely. Around the front you get Series 2 gave this superb front that's, I mean, instantly recognisable as classic Jaguar. Reduced the size of the grille. We had that grille where it's sort of hiding behind the number plate. Just a really elegant thing. And of course on this one, the prize badge of V12 loveliness. Being an XJ, you obviously get a giant boot, and on this XJs of this period you had twin filler tanks, which are completely separate, as we'll get to inside. You actually have to press a switch to swap one to the other. Prize badge, fuel injection in 1978 when this car first came out was a big deal. 5.3C, so a pretty serious motor car. 295 horsepower, 285 horsepower, 295 foot-pounds. It competed against, well, they weren't quite sure what to pitch it against, actually. I was looking at the road tests, and they put it against the sort of price matched it with cars like the BMW 633, but it absolutely wipes the floor on performance of that car. This one is 150 miles an hour, 7.6 to 60. And 150 mile an hour top speed would really put it in a class of its own, because back then the BMW 633 was 134 miles an hour, which was about the same as the Mercedes SLC 450 Coupe, and the 911, that was still 135, 140 miles an hour. So 150 mile an hour coupe, that was a big deal. It's when you open the door to this car, you get to spot some of the differences. First of all, you're met with a period Momo wheel with a rather lovely V12 badge in the middle of it. In the Series 1 they had a series of dials right in the middle of the dash. This one's got those extra vents instead, which is a bit of a shame. So it's the wood dash as ever, as you just sort of imagine in every Jaguar. This one is the lovely black trim, as you can see. I think it's got retrimmed fairly recently. But what defines this car is that gearbox, because they all came with 3-speed automatics, but the owner of this car decided in 2001 what this car really needed was a manual gearbox, and of course it completely transforms the way this car drives, as we'll get to see in a moment. So the previous owner not only put the manual gearbox, he also had a little play with the engine as well. Now before I show you the engine, I ought to give it a slight health warning because it's not pretty under here. This was 1978, fuel injection was very new, and everything is on show. So compared to today's engines, this looks a bit scary. And there we go. Now what he did on this car, as a company AJ6, who create new manifolds for this V12 engine. In standard form, this is 285 horsepower and around 300 foot-pounds. But by putting these on, which has bigger throttle bodies here and a slave ECU, you start to get an increase in horsepower. They also put this new airbox on down here, and then down here you can see it's got twin open pipes here just to increase the amount of air that this engine can breathe. And the combined effect of all this is an extra around 45 horsepower and 30 foot-pounds of torque. So we're up around the 325 horsepower, 330 foot-pounds. So quite a lot of horsepower under this bonnet. Combine that with a manual gearbox and suddenly you have a completely different character of V12 XJ Coupe. Just some other things around the engine I must show you. Is why it looks so scary is they actually put the distributor right in the middle of it, so you've got this complete spaghetti of spark plug leads, throttle body on top here, and all the injectors are on show. These are the return lines for the fuel, so it's all horrible mess, especially just on top of the radiator there. It sort of reminds me of a development car that they haven't quite finished. So it's a typical engineer's car, everything's on show, so it's dead easy to fix, but perhaps not a sort of bonnet that you say, oh, look at my V12. Yes, that noise. It's like, yeah, a sort of baked bean can. I don't know why it's so tinny. I don't know if you can hear that. I mean, it's like there's no sound deadening on the roof, and without the vinyl roof you hear that. When I brought this car home for the first time, I have to say, my wife sort of looked at me and thought, what have you bought now? But I'm in love with it. She doesn't have to travel in it. And one of the reasons I'm in love with it, I don't know if you can pick this up, it's like there's no flywheel on it. XJC V12s don't normally sound like that. You have this lazy lever 3-speed automatic, but this car is completely transformed by having a manual. The other slightly strange thing about this car is you seem to sit quite low, but there's a dip where your feet and legs go, and it has quite a nice seating position, but you've got this sort of space up to the top. Anyway, we're going to take it out and I'll show you some other sort of fun things about this car. Now you'll probably, as we go along, you'll pick up some squeaks and rattles and various noises coming from this car, but I sort of forgive it because I only paid £5,500 for it, and it's had a sort of fairly tough life. I was talking to the guys who used to look after it, and they said that the owner owned it all this time, did all the modification. All he really cared about was driving it, and the outside appearance and inside appearance was very much secondary. He used to do various events with it as well. I've got in the history, he's got this record of the speed he did in 2004. Apparently Jaguar Club used to run these speed trials, and he achieved 133.93 miles an hour, which is pretty quick and puts him in with the the quick XJS's, 6-litre XJS's, and the what else was there? Oh, an XJR as well. So yeah, that sort of, they're newer cars than this, but that sort of speed it was doing. There was a DB5 there that did about 124 miles an hour. That was about 10 miles an hour behind. There was an Elise that was the same sort of speed, Elise 135, and a TR6 that did 116 miles an hour. So it gets a bit of a move on. It's not really a sports car, it's just a bit of a hoot, this car. The surprise factor is also geared, incredibly long gearing on this car. First almost takes you to 60 miles an hour, and then the gears are quite closely stacked. Just your first little taste. There's a bit of a bark to this engine. It's mainly actually on induction bark, but completely different to a normal XJC. But if I put it into top, here we are, and I will try and do, well, I'm doing 50 miles an hour, and I have 1400 revs on the clock. So that gives you a sort of taste of how overgeared it's an overdrive really fit. And the one thing you suddenly discover if you own a V12 Jaguar, completely different character the engine has to an XK engine, the normal straight 6 that you find in E-types, and also this this vintage of XJ. That was bear with me, a long stroke engine. The V12 is very much a short stroke, so it likes to rev. And the reason behind it, well, actually it was developed from the XJ13. Jaguar developed the V12 in the first instance because it was going to go racing. Obviously the XJ13 was a quad cam, so made for racing, and so William Lyons rejected it on a refinement, and he said we have to produce the V12 for my road cars, but we've got to make it much more refined. How do we do it? So he went down to single cam on each bank, and it is whisper quiet engine, and the refinement in a standard one is amazing. But it likes to rev, and that is the difference of this car. So I just changed our end a second. Here we are, 3000 revs on the clock, and away we go. That is so different to an XK engined XJ in this vintage. The V12, completely different character. And it's not animal like a Ferrari, but God, is it creamy smooth. And with this, it's got a little bark at the top end that's very addictive. One thing I should explain on this car is you have the two tanks, and the switch is down here, and there's no reserve light or anything. Suddenly I found myself running out of fuel. Oh no! I pressed the other fuel switch, and I switched literally to the other tank. And here I'm on a quarter of a tank on the left-hand tank, and I'm just over half full on the right-hand tank. It's just bizarre. Why would you have two tanks? You actually literally have to press a button and switch between. It also, yes, it likes a drink. The tanks don't last that long. They talked about 12-13 mpg when it was new. I have to say with the mods, yeah, I reckon if I squirt around the lanes and drive like a hooligan, I'm about 12-13 to the gallon. 15 cruising up if I'm going up to the office or something like that. But yeah, it's a good job petrol prices have come down recently because yes, it's quite expensive on fuel. It's amazingly healthy, this car. It's got 106,000 miles on it on the clock. Quite busy, and by all reports he used to drive it really pretty hard all the time, and this just shows you that if you do drive the cars regularly and you do drive them pretty hard, it doesn't actually do them any harm. What's worse is actually them sitting in the garage forever and not actually being used. It's a shame they didn't actually produce any 5-speed, 4-speed XJ12s in period coupes. According to the guys back at Jaguar, there were one or two of the management actually had special cars built, but this 5-speed gearbox I've got here is so much better than the 4-speed that was in period at the time at Jaguar in the 70s. So actually this is actually the best compromise. It's amazingly rare though. I know of only one other car that's been converted like this, and it's such a shame because it's a bit of a treat. Oh, it pitches around, rolls around on its top rubber. It's on 205 70/15s, and actually when it arrived it had a different set of wheels on. It's slightly boaty on these standard tyres. It's just a bit of a hoot. One thing I quickly discovered is the brakes needed upgrading. He hadn't touched the brakes, he just added power. So I put some yellow stuff, some special brake pads in it, just to give it a bit more braking, which it so desperately needed. And it's a car that I go rather too quick in most of the time, because it's such a silky smooth V12. It's sort of fairly hushed. You say, oh, I'll change up another gear if it makes, you know, and I can't tell you what speed I'm doing. That would be a bad idea. So you make some pretty quick cross-country progress in this car. And I keep having to tell myself now I shouldn't be driving it like this. This car is approaching its 40th birthday. I should just be wrapping it up. Should I actually get it restored? No, I'll just drive the bloody wheels off it. Fire up the jump. Whoa! Oh, sparks. Whoa! Yeah, I definitely need those dampers. I think this is a work in progress sort of car, and there's a few things I'm going to do to it. One thing, I've got to tighten up its suspension, because I don't think it's been looked at in quite a while, and it's a bit light on damping at the rear. And I think it should have more of a voice from the outside. You know, I've got a V12 up the front, so I might have a little go of the exhaust. So if you keep watching Harry's Garage, you'll see this car sort of develop over time. But in the meantime, thanks for joining me. Please subscribe to Harry's Garage, and I'll see you very soon.